Good morning. You all look wonderful out there today. And as I look across this audience, I see people from all segments of the community. And that is very important to us, because anything that we do for our young people, it's going to take an entire city and the county and the school board to be a part of it. We have connected as partners with our religious community, but this is a time that I'm proud to say that we've connected with the school board members. I'm going to ask the school board members to please stand. I see three, right? Jolene. Thank you. Oh, and Jolene, the new, will be going in as the superintendent. Thank you all. President. Okay. We also have people here. I see a number of ministers, and if I go around the room, it will take entirely too long. We do want to make sure that we are able to come out with a plan. It is about the African American males here in this community. We started out doing a summit with high school young people last year with our first summit. And from that, we have come out with a plan that was presented at the last one council meeting, not on yesterday, but 2 weeks prior to that. We've had a summit with middle schoolers, and there are some bright young people. So we will be pulling together something with them. This council feels that it is better to ask our young people what they want, plan with them instead of for them. This has been under the leadership of our Mayor Pro Tem, Van Johnson and Collis Bates, and all of the crew. I tell young people that you always have people that you can work with. We have a step up involved in this as well, and y'all can see I can't talk too much. But someone just walked in this door, and I served under his administration, and that is Dr. Otis Johnson. Dr. Johnson, when he first went to the meetings at the National League of Cities, he became involved in children, families, youth, a lot, and it's a program that has afforded us the opportunity to do what we're trying to do here today. Dr. Johnson, will you please, Mayor Johnson, as I always call him, stand and be recognized. Many of the ideas that we have put forth came out of his administration. And I am glad because, I've always been told that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just take what you have and you keep moving with it. And out of that, you're going to have a wonderful program. Let me also recognize our city manager, Stephanie Cutter. Stephanie, please stand and be recognized. And I also must recognize our council members, Carol Bell, Mary Ellen Sprague, and I said Van. Mary Osborne wanted to be here. She's a little under the weather. Continue to pray for all of us. So with that, Van Johnson has been the contact person with it. But before I turn it over to him, I want to say thank you to the National League of Cities and the people that are here from Washington, D.C. We're bringing in the best and the brightest. We have brought in people from the U.S. Office of Education. This is what we want to do. I see the executive assistant. What is that your title? And okay, from the Board of Education. I see judges. Y'all, I'm excited. You know, and I'm going to stop talking now. But this is a brother. This is a challenge. My brother's keepers. Guess what? We're going to be my brother's keepers. So with all of the thoughts that are going to come from you, we will put everything together. Then we will present it out in the community, because we are tired of hearing about kids being shot, kids dying. We want to say, come to our centers, come to our after-school programs, and let us help you so we can have more and more of our young people reaching to be successful. There is one area that I'm hoping that we will be able to interface and also to work with, and that is getting our Chamber of Commerce to talk about jobs in this community for our young people. I can't remember the initials that they used to use when our young people could apply for jobs. But we do have to reach out. And as I said, City Council cannot do it alone. But with your help, we are recognized all over the country for our programs. With your help, we will be number one. Again, may God continue to bless all of you. Thank you for giving up this time. And let us all leave here working together. Judge Stone, it is wonderful. I hope this is feeding in to what you have talked to us about also. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Today is representative of a conversation that was held in the book of Genesis between a father and a son who was looking for his other son. And he was asked the question, "Where is my son?" And the brother replied, "Am I my brother's keeper?" We thank you so much for joining us out of your busy schedule, obviously on a Friday in the holiday season, to spend a couple of hours with us today. Today is the manifestation of work that began some years ago. And I'm so glad to see our mentor, Dr. Otis Johnson here. He preceded me on the National League of Cities Institute of Youth Education and Families. As a matter of fact, he chaired this, and a lot of this, as Mayor Jackson said, is manifestation of some of the work that he started. We are also very happy to have today from the National League of Cities, Cities United, Leon Andrews, Geraldine Black, and Shantae Byers. Mayor Jackson was one of the first mayors in the country to sign on to Cities United. I serve on the National League of Cities board, and we were very glad that Savannah was going to be represented. We went to the White House, I believe, in March to meet with the president's staff members regarding this, and Savannah is on their minds. We were one of the first 100 communities to join the My Brother's Keepers Challenge. It's a call of action for cities, tribal nations, towns, and counties to build and execute robust plans to ensure that all young people, no matter who they are, where they come from, or the circumstances into which they are born, can achieve their full potential. So this is also very personal to me, because I am a black male. And I can never be all that I can be if all are not all that they can be. I can tell you that our young black males were not destined to be in cemeteries. They're not destined to be in prisons or jails. And they're certainly not destined to be hanging in the streets. I want to show something for purposes of context, because content without context is really just conjecture. Mayor Johnson, I'm sure you remember this. This is what we say here in Savannah. Savannah will be a safe, environmentally healthy, and economically thriving community for all its citizens. Everybody say all. All of its citizens. And that's what we are trying to work for in this community. Now let's talk about that for a moment. I just asked some local agencies a snapshot where they are in the work that's in their mind, the work that they are focused on. And when you look at HIV infections among blacks in Georgia 2013, if you look, blacks accounted for 64% of adults living with HIV. 60% of men and 75% of women are infected by HIV that happen to be African American. 55% are new HIV infections, and 70% of them are new AIDS diagnosis. 79% of deaths with HIV infection of 2012 were of African Americans, and of course, according to the 2012 population estimates, 30% of our population in Georgia is black. And this is really part of what we call a courageous conversation. For so long in our community, we stayed away from the taboo issue of race. And that's what's killing us, because we don't want to talk about it. Our reality is very, very clear. Black people didn't want to talk about it because we considered it airing dirty laundry. White people didn't want to talk about it because they were going to be called racist. Well, we're talking about it. And we say it's okay to talk about it because you can't solve it unless you first talk about it. So we're going to just lay it out on the table where it is. Nationwide, homicide is still the leading cause of death for young black males ages 15 to 34. This is from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control. If you look over here, homicide, homicide, homicide. Number one leading cause of death. 435 members in the U.S. House of Representatives, and yet every day, every 15 days, 435 young Americans die under the age of 25 from homicide, suicide, child abuse, and neglect. We have to be better than this. In some states, black men are incarcerated on drug charges at rates 20 to 50 times greater than those of white men. Yet studies show that people of all colors use and sell drugs at remarkably similar rates. Also, crimes committed by those of other races or those of other social and economic groups are often unreported or underreported. So it's not that everybody's doing wrong, it's just who reports it and how it's reported. In cities racked by the war of drugs, 80% of young African American men now have criminal records and are thus subject to legalized discrimination for the rest of their lives. And if current trends continue, 1 in 3 young African American men will serve time in prison. We're not claiming that here in Savannah. And I found this very interesting. The United States imprisons a larger percentage of its black population than South Africa did at the heart of apartheid. We need to put things into context. Let's look at the census data for Chatham County and Savannah. Total 18% African American males in Chatham County. In Savannah, we represent about 24% of the population. If you look at the numbers, they're very clear. Between the ages of 10 and 29, we represent 77% of Chatham County's population and 9% of Savannah's population. So keep that in mind. Less than 10% of the city/county's population is African American males in this age range, 10 to 29 years old. DFAC says, well, there are 108 kids out of 240 that are African American males that are waiting for or are involved in foster care services, that are waiting for a home. And we know, Dr. Johnson, if a young child doesn't have a reliable home, it begins a whole bunch of things that are sometimes irreversible. 108 out of 240 are African American males. But again, 9 to 10% of the population. In our county, health issues, heart and vascular disease, neoplasm of the trachea, bronchus, and lung, which is lung cancer, 3 is assault. 4, cerebral vascular disease. And 5, hypertension and hypertensive renal and heart disease are our ranked causes. But if you look, the male homicide rate by 100,000 by race, if you look, all males in Georgia about 10%, African American males in Georgia about a little over 20%, so 20, and African American males in Chatham County almost 40. Context. In our community, youth are more likely to be the violence of violent crime. If you look, the numbers are very clear. Under the age of 30, from here, going all the way back, I got it right, there you go, there, going back, 59% of the victims of violent crime are 30 years and younger. Conversely, youth are also likely to be more likely to be the suspects of violent crime. 73% of the suspects are 30 years old and younger. 30 years old, and this was really as of this week. This just talks about what we've talked about already. Among youth 30 and under, black males are more likely to be the victims, half, and the perpetrators, 78%. We're killing ourselves. We're killing ourselves. And it's been said that if you don't have hope, and if you don't see a future for your life, you don't care about yourself or anybody else. Again, 10% of the population. So far this year, in this community, 22 black males have lost their lives as a victim of homicide. 22. 10% of the population. 15 of those were under the age of 30. 4 of them were ages 12, 15, and 2 16-year-olds. Tomorrow I'm speaking at a funeral of a 12-year-old that was gunned down in our community. But 12 of the 15 have had some interaction with our criminal justice system, either personally or from people they associate with. There's something wrong with this. And this picture speaks for itself. Remember that, Dr. Johnson? Yes, sir. It's updated. 1,300 black males, 21 and under, were arrested in 2013. If I had hair, some of that could look like me. These are our constituencies. These are who our daughters have left to marry. These are fathers who should be on the ball fields with their children. But 1,300 of them, 21 and under, found their way into our criminal justice system. Thanks to Colonel Gilbert and folks at the jail, as of yesterday, 1,490 people are on Carl Griffin Drive. 67% of them are black males. 67%. Remember, we're 10% of the population here, but 67% of them look like me. From our juvenile court, just for definitions, they've changed the rules as it relates to the deprived children. They now call them dependent children. A child who's been abused and neglected is in need of protection of the court. Someone who's been placed in care or adoption in violation of the law. Someone who is without his or her parent, guardian, or legal custodian. In 2013, if you look, 36%, the largest demographic, they're black males. And if you look, a lot of black females too, 31%. But the majority of them, black males. Remember, 10% of the population. A delinquent act is very clear, an act committed by a child designated a crime by the laws of this state or laws of another state. The act of disobeying the terms of supervision or failure to appear. When you look at delinquent acts, black males, 62%. This is in juvenile court. These are folks that haven't even made it into the adult criminal justice system yet. Remember, 10% of the population. This is what we're working with. And from the District Attorney's Office, thank you, Assistant District Attorney Morel McLeod. This is what's on the horizon, what we call the great gun obsession. We've been told in the community, Mayor Jackson, that there are places in our community where kids can go and get a gun. They can rent a gun, they can borrow a gun, and they can bring it back after they're finished. So the great gun obsession, 20 referrals just in 2014 for possession of a pistol by a minor. 20. 3 referrals by possession of a pistol by a minor felony, which means they had been already previously convicted. They prosecuted children as young as 11 years old for possession of a weapon, both BB guns and actual firearms. And as I close this presentation, I just want you to, this is just so scary. Can you see which gun is real? That one or that one? Can you tell the difference? And this is what our law enforcement officers are facing. When they see someone walking around with a gun, or if you're being robbed, this is what they're facing with. Well, actually, this gun is the real gun. But they look just alike, don't they? Real or make-believe? Can you tell? I believe it's that one. I believe. I think that's a real gun. That's a real gun. But these are toy guns. And these were guns that were confiscated. Which one is real? That's the real one. But if somebody robs you and they put something like that to your face, what you gonna do? And we just hate that a child might actually be blown away for pulling some mess like this. That's the real gun. But that looks awfully real, doesn't it? When I was growing up, toy guns looked like toy guns. Real plastic. So today, we're not here to point blame. We can get really tied up in pointing blame. We're not assigning blame. We're talking solutions. We're talking about people. We're talking about policies. We're talking about programs. We're talking about practices. The My Brother's Keeper initiative and Cities United, we've come up with a list of 14 things a community can do today to end violence or to reduce violence, and Leon will talk about that a little later. But this is not it. We don't want this to be an event. We want this to be a continuum. So we think that you're among the best and brightest in the community. If you're here, it was because you were invited here. If you're here, it's because we felt you had something to offer to the conversation. So when we leave here today, this is a part of a bigger conversation. We want to make sure, and the mayor said more than one occasion, the city manager also, for the people that the city of Savannah gives money to, if you get money from us, you're going to be a part of our team. We have to do this together, and we have to do it as a community. So I thank you all so much. It's my pleasure now to introduce, oh, you're gonna do the video? All right, well, we're gonna do the video. But I want you to think about those numbers. It shows us that we have, as a community, a lot of work to do. And when we come together again, we want to make sure, if we've done our job, that all of these statistics change for the better. God bless. Thank you.
We had to get all dressed up to go to my dad's funeral. I couldn't wait to see him. I haven't seen my dad since he dropped me off at school. I remember being so happy seeing him, and I wanted to run to him, but now he was laying down in the box, looking like he was asleep. Everyone that walked around the box looked at my dad and cried. People kept telling me it's going to be okay, little guy. What I wanted to say was, it's not okay. He's gone. He was my best friend, the one person who would always take care of me, and the only one that said, son, I am so proud of you, and I love you. Changed me bad. Acting up in school, have to go to another school. My mom was mad at me because my teacher had to call her like once a week, like probably twice a week. Yeah, I was mad because my dad wasn't here. It's like I couldn't see my dad no more in person. I could only see him in pictures.
I was his parent. I was his mother. I was his teacher. And now he's not here to carry it on. But he knows that I will help him continue.
Like, we used to hearing gunshots. Like, gunshots was like usual. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, just another one. He got hit this time. He got hit in the stomach, his neck, and he didn't die on, like, right there. He went to the hospital. A week later, he died. And it was kind of crazy, like, because I ain't never been through that. That was, like, my first time. And then, like, my other friends, they didn't die around me, but that was the more experience I had. Like, my friend, like, I can practically say he died before my eyes.
See, the shoes that I have to wear, they hurt like hell. They never get light. They always have. Pray no one else goes through what you're going through. 'Cause no one knows.
I'm a prime example of what happens when you don't listen to your parents. Or not even listen, when you don't listen to what's right. You know what I'm saying? Like, or if you try to play both sides of the field, do good and do bad. Now I'm popped off again. Ain't no telling what's gonna happen behind this case. Hopefully something good. It's looking like something good. I don't wanna say it like it may not be nothing good. It ain't gonna be nothing that bad. Ain't gonna be nothing I can't overcome or come from underneath. But it's another pause in my life.
So by the age of 15, I had already started to progress into different things, you know, learning more about my street culture and what was going on. I call it my street culture because I felt I was a part of it. It was like a part of me. It was in my veins. It was in my dress. It was in my talk. It was in my walk. It was the way I disrespected women. It was in the way that I disrespected my household, you know, the way I brought shame to my family because I really didn't have no ramifications of what I couldn't do or what I can do. I just went. And I did whatever the heart felt, whatever the heart desired, you know? And that transformed into, now it's a lifestyle. It's my livelihood. It's how I breathe. It's how I make my little money on the side. It's how I eat. Now it's how I influence. Now I got other young people up under me, and they're looking for me, looking for answers, looking for direction, because maybe they're missing some stuff in the household or at school, or they just don't have that. And they want to belong to something. That's all we want, is just to belong to something good, something that's actually going to help us. And sometimes the negativity ends up being the thing that we perceive as it's helping us. You know, I got a crew, I got people around, I got, you know, if I get in a fight, I got help, you know? If I got to get in a shootout, I got somebody to call. They're going to shoot with me because they're a little deranged like I am. I think that, you know, put a stain in my mindset to the point where I felt that, okay, I'm invincible. You know, these young guys now think, oh, I could do whatever and get away with it. Nobody going to question me. And that's wrong.
We have to first focus on changing the thinking processes of our young men. Because the way they're thinking is, if I'm making $1,000 a day selling drugs, well, I'm gonna go work a job while I'm making $1,000 a week. To them and to their thinking processes, it doesn't make sense. So we have to focus on changing the thinking patterns. We have to focus on changing self-worth.
People are afraid to let others know that they're incompetent, or they don't know this or they don't know that. So it's even simple situations like that that result into killing. You know, just off the strength of I'm hiding this flaw. I mean, not knowing that everybody else in the world have flaws too. A lot of times people look for power in so many different aspects, and that's another one of the contributing factors to the problem. Young men do not know what power is. They think, you know, being dominant over a female and being abusive to a female is being a man. At the end of the day, none of that measures your manhood. None of that is power. None of that is true power. At the end of the day, that's fear, and fear is not power.
I don't have no more sister. I can't stress enough how bad that feel. I don't like dwelling on it, because I don't like using nothing for excuse, and I don't like nobody feeling sympathy or sorry for me. But it's the truth. That shit hurt, knowing you ain't gonna never have a nephew or niece. I ain't gonna never be able to grow old, my sister, crack jokes with her. I ain't gonna have kids, they ain't gonna have no auntie. Stuff like that, it hurt. And that is more parents losing kids, more brothers losing sisters, more sisters losing brothers.
Stop and think before you pull that trigger. Because once you do that, there is no turning back. There is no words you can say. There's nothing you can do, because once that person is gone, that person is gone. You have taken not just a human being, you've destroyed a family, part of a community.
I've been shot 3 times, AK-47 in that lifestyle. My brother was shot over 12 times in that lifestyle. My other brother was killed in that lifestyle. My cousin was killed in that lifestyle. My friend was killed in that lifestyle. I could just keep on going and going and going and going and going. It's just like, when is it gonna stop? And if we keep asking that question without coming up with a solution, it's never gonna stop.
By 18, graduating high school. Only way I graduated is because I got locked up and went to a juvenile facility. And it was a woman there that had took a liking to me, and she said, you know what, I'm gonna help you. Every day I'm here on the clock. I was in the mountains in the Poconos somewhere, sleeping in tents, with people that I've never ever been around. And she made me pushed me to the limit to get through school. So by the time I got back in society, I could walk with my class and graduate, you know, and which I did. A week later, I just happened to be getting out a week before graduation. And then I go to my 18th birthday. I get through that, which is a blessing. And then I attempt the murder charge, you know what I mean? And that was like right after, you know, so that was like showing my progression, you know, from the little stuff that I was doing and then how it turned into the bigger situation.
This is where I grew up at. And this is where the police took me to jail at and went to death row from this house. You know, it's kind of mixed emotions when I come back here because on one level it's just happy to be free and just to come back here and talk about it. But then on the other end, you know, I'm a little pissed, man. I'm a little pissed because sometimes I think about my whole childhood just robbed from me. My young adult life was just robbed from me. And a lot of young black men were just playing right into the big game. The first day for me, as a 16-year-old kid walking on death row, it didn't seem real. You know, it was like, man, it's not happening to me. But I didn't even cry. You know, when a jury came back with a guilty verdict, I didn't shed a tear. When the jury came back with a death sentence, I didn't shed a tear. But for me to walk in that cell and for that cell to slam shut, I realized that this is my reality, is that I'm gonna die here. You know, I'm a kid. I would never have a high school graduation. I would never even, you know, have a high school prom. I would never make kids. You know, I'm gonna die here. This is my fate.
I had a good support system at home, but at the end of the day, I was searching for love elsewhere. You know, I wanted it in my neighborhood. I wanted it in my pockets. You know, I thought money was love. And so all of these thoughts was going through my head when I was sitting in my cell on my 21st birthday. And, you know, I came out of prison. It was like, damn, I didn't have the same support system anymore. You know, my mother was struggling. Father, he's in another relationship. You know, so everything was like weird. It was different. I didn't know how to really articulate myself with him. You know, so I ran straight into the work, you know, and the work that I do now. You know, and that was my comfort. That was, you know, like, that was the love that I was missing, that I knew I wasn't gonna come home to.
I started the organization as a preventive measure to crime and violence of our young black kids. I don't like to use the term at-risk youth because every youth in the city is not at risk. You know, I like to use the term for what it really is. We're talking about young black men, and we need to say it, because the more we say it, the more we realize it. You know, when we say young at-risk youth, you know, you can put a white face on the youth, but when you say a young black man, then I want you to feel it. I want to help young black men to change the way they think, to look at themselves in the best light possible, to become a beacon. A beacon is a hope of inspiration.
I mean, there's a lot of situations I've gotten myself into, sticky situations that I've gotten myself into that I was blessed enough to be able to see my way out of. And it's really just about showing the next generation, showing this population, showing my generation, you know, that that's not the only option. There's other things out here, you know. That's not the only way of life, you know. There's other ways to live, you know. That's not your only, you know, that's not your only alternative. There's other alternatives. Just giving them that sense of hope that was taken away, giving them that sense of self-worth that they may not have, you know. And that's what my focus is today, you know, just coming through the life path that I've came through, just off of seeing people killed, seeing domestic situations, seeing people, parents turn to drugs, seeing friends and family members turn to drugs, you know, seeing these things take place, and then stepping back into reality and taking accountability for my own actions and thinking on the days I helped contribute to these same situations.
A lot of people put too much feelings and caring into things that don't matter. Like who got this, who got that. That's what drives a lot of kids to do things, to get things, to feel accepted and welcome into a certain area or a crowd or whatever. When honestly, if you just work hard, it's gonna pay off in the long run. Like I never believed that, cause I always want stuff to happen 24 hours span, or right then and right now. Like I have no choice now, especially when on this house arrest ban. I ain't got nothing but to be patient. And every day I practice being patient. I see time from time something good happening.
You know, in this day and age, you know, when I say it's helped make me a better man, I think it's helped, you know, complete me to a certain degree, as far as, you know, I actually care about things that I never used to care about. Like, you know, caring about what my children are doing or who they're around, who they're surrounded with, different stuff like that. You know, stuff that I never used to care about, you know, when I had little siblings or my little nieces and nephews. I also think that it actually made me value life a lot more, because I understand how precious it is, as opposed to the way that I used to value life. You know, it was like it really meant not much to me. You know, especially being in the street culture that I took to, you know, even though I wasn't raised that way. You know, it actually has me more in touch with myself, you know, and it actually helped me, you know, get in touch with, you know, more of my feminine side, if I could say that, you know, and I know a lot of men probably won't agree with me, but it's true. You know, becoming a father, you actually start to care more about, you know, how life is actually brought, you know, to us. And, you know, you start to look at the women in your life, you know, from your mother, you know, to your significant other. You start to look at them in a better light. And I think that's what, you know, brought me around, you know, was seeing, you know, the children, you know, come about. And, you know, there was a lot of rough spells I had, you know, being a father starting out, you know, because I don't have the relationship with my children that I actually yearn for. You know, I still have to work towards that, you know, because I was actually going from a, you know, big portion of their beginning of their lives, you know, by being in prison and making some of the choices that I made in the past.
Got the world on my shoulders. How many feel that way in here tonight? Them little babies getting older. I got no job, I can't sleep at night. They killing kids for no reason. A stray bullet, it can take a life. Is you only gonna get it when one of yours bleeding? How we do nothing when we know it ain't right. It's no lie, you and I could rebuild history. We must fight, you and I stay alive, live in peace. It's no lie, you and I could rebuild history. We must fight, you and I stay alive, live in peace. It's no lie, you and I could rebuild history. We must fight, you and I stay alive, live in peace.
Good morning. So my name is Leon Andrews with the National League of Cities in Washington, D.C. And it is my pleasure to be here in the city of Savannah, Georgia. Not my first time, but I always enjoy coming back. And so thank Mayor Jackson and Vice Mayor Johnson for hosting us here in Savannah. I also see one of our good friends as well, acknowledged as well, former Mayor Johnson, Dr. Johnson. It's great to see him as well. I wanted to give you a little bit of context about why we're here and the work that the National League of Cities is doing around this work. You heard from Vice Mayor Johnson as well, but I've been at the National League of Cities for 9 years. In my capacity there, I oversee a broad range of work around youth development, and community wellness. So we are, as an organization, designed to be a membership-based organization supporting cities, city elected officials. So Mayor Jackson and Vice Mayor Johnson, they serve in leadership roles within our organization, and we provide support to cities across the country. But in my role, and the reason why I've been there 9 years, we uniquely have created this Institute for Youth Education and Families that allows us to work specifically with cities about building their capacity to improve outcomes for children, youth, and families. And that's where my heart is, that's my passion, my career has been in that space, and I've learned a lot in my time there in terms of how we engage and support cities, and learned about who's out there doing some major things, who's taking ideas and advancing it within their cities. And so I say that because it's great to be here in Savannah and to be here in your city, as you heard from two of your elected officials, and for you to know in this room, even as we start to have this conversation, Savannah is a city that is always shown as a city of kind of best practices, promising practices in the country. Whether we're talking about mid-sized cities or large-sized cities, you probably if not the first sentence, it's the second sentence that typically comes out of our mouth, like, have you seen what's going on in Savannah? And so we really come here to celebrate what you're doing, but also to really to congratulate you for taking on what we think at the National League of Cities is, as Van was saying, a courageous conversation, right? And I say that from my perspective, because 4 years ago, when the Open Society Foundation came to us and said, would you have a conversation with mayors across the country to talk about black male achievement? I was like, my cynical nature was, I don't think people want to talk about black men and boys with our diverse membership. Now we can talk about youth. You heard Sharif on the video say we could talk about at-risk youth, right? Or we could talk about vulnerable youth. We could talk about everything else but a race conversation, right? And so I said, okay, we're interested in trying to figure out what this looks like with our membership. Because we've been doing this work and we know cities are, really talking about this work, whether we call it disconnected youth or whatever, right? And so this is kind of what it looked like for us when we started to have conversations with elected officials. So this diagram for me captures what I learned 4 years ago. So at the top of that pyramid, there were very few mayors out front 4 years ago talking about black men and boys. No surprise, right? Mayor Nutter from Philadelphia was probably the most visible that I remember 4 years ago. And for those that found him on YouTube 4 years ago, he got caught saying some non-PC things because there was some flash mobs going on in this city, and he went to his church, said some stuff about calling them knuckleheads and we need to do some stuff about this. But he actually got emboldened by that because people really appreciated him stepping out and calling out what he was finding in his city. And he really started taking on this issue around black men and boys. But then there were other examples we were learning 4 years ago about mayors that were framing it around boys and men of color. The most famous was Mayor Bloomberg, former Mayor Bloomberg, who not only was talking about it, but he took $30 million of his money, put it on the table, and then George Soros came and put $30 million of his money. So two billionaires put $60 million into a pool of money, and New York City was off and running a Young Men's Initiative. So we were learning a lot about what New York was doing 4 years ago to really advance this work in their city. But we saw a lot more examples of mayors and cities that we were talking to 4 years ago that were called and framing it around from a place-based approach. The president, early on in his initiative, launched Promise Neighborhoods. And so Promise Neighborhoods or Choice Neighborhoods were used as a way of targeting neighborhoods. And if you talk to mayors that were launching those efforts, they were very intentional about neighborhoods that were predominantly African American or predominantly Hispanic, and targeting black men and boys in that context, right? And so Mayor Dyer in Orlando was an example of a mayor through his Paramore Kids Zone where we were learning about a place-based strategy and how he was taking on a black men and boys. And then at the bottom of that pyramid, we saw a lot more examples of mayors that were using different issues to take on black men and boys, whether it was the dropout factories or violence prevention or fatherhood initiatives or unemployment. So they were framing the initiative as broadly as that. And so one example that I remember very clearly is when I was in Milwaukee with Mayor Barrett. They have a pretty successful fatherhood initiative. And I was sitting in his office talking to him about it, and we were there to really understand how his leadership is really focused on black men and boys. And he was saying, Leon, we call it fatherhood, but we really are targeting black fathers, right? And so while it might not be saying black male achievement, that's essentially what we're doing in our investments and our resource allocation and so forth. So that gave us a landscape of where things were 4 years ago. But there's a lot that has happened in the last 4 years, right? And from us at the National League of Cities, the starting point, and you heard some of this from Van, was from the data standpoint. And so the thing that really compelled us early on was really looking at some of the data. And some of the data for us was just shocking. City after city, Baltimore, Boston, looking at homicide rates by gender and by race and gender, Buffalo, Chicago, Cleveland, Columbus, Ohio, Indianapolis, Jackson, Mississippi, Kansas City, Missouri, Memphis, Tennessee, Minneapolis, Newark, Oakland, Philadelphia, Seattle, St. Louis. 184 cities I could put up there. City after city in this country, a disproportionate number of black men and boys are dying in our streets across the country. Didn't even understand the scale of it when we started this work. And it's not even close. We're talking 60, 70, 80% of homicide rates in cities across this country. Black men and boys are dying. And so there's a term that Dr. Powell used. How many have heard false universalism or targeted universalism? So Dr. John Powell came up with this term that was helpful for us at the National League of Cities. He said, armed with this data, and so I could have put up education data there, right? Or we could have put up unemployment data, city after city. Armed with this data, Dr. Powell says many communities still take this universal approach to violence prevention or education or unemployment. And his argument is that universal approaches that are not sensitive to the needs of the particular, they tend not to have an uneven impact, right? This is what he calls false universalism. It assumes that targeted policies that address the needs of certain populations become a divisive wedge. It also assumes that everyone benefits if we take these universal approaches, right? But universal approaches that are not sensitive to the needs of the particular are never truly universal. They tend to exacerbate racial inequality at times, right? And so targeted universalism, Dr. Powell's argument, is that we want to be universal in our goals, but not in our strategies, right? And so as we launched this initiative, you saw that video before I started, it helped launch Cities United. We were in New Orleans in February, where we had our inaugural event, launching it this year. We had over 225 participants, over about 20 mayors and elected officials, young people, faith leaders. And so it's been a partnership of folks that have come together to really launch this initiative that's called Cities United. Made up of Mayor Nutter and Mayor Landrieu, who have been out front originally on this work. Mayor Nutter from Philadelphia, Mayor Landrieu from New Orleans. They call themselves the ebony and ivory of this initiative, right? So if you know Mayor Nutter, he is African American, and Mayor Landrieu is Caucasian, but they both are passionate. Sometimes Mayor Nutter likes to say, I'm actually ivory and he's ebony, right? Because they're both just incredibly passionate, right, about how this is playing out in their cities. But it's a range of other partners, foundations, Open Society Foundation's Campaign for Black Male Achievement, KC Family Programs, National League of Cities, U.S. Conference of Mayors, a number of foundations have come together. But in addition to those mayors, remember that top of the pyramid I showed you where I didn't see a whole lot of mayors that were coming out 4 years ago talking about black men and boys? Over now 60 mayors, 64 mayors across the country have now joined Cities United. And Mayor Jackson, who is one of the first, as Van was saying earlier, to join Cities United when we launched it earlier this year. And so the commitment that these mayors are making starts with this belief statement. And for me, this is pretty powerful in light of recent events that have been happening with the Eric Gardner. But the belief statement that these mayors came up even before the Eric Gardner statement is that we believe African American men and boys' lives matter, right? And are assets to our nation, which should not be squandered, right? That's the starting point, that their lives matter. And the mission statement from Cities United is that the mayors are committing to developing and implementing partnerships locally that bring together those that are here in this room, a diverse range of stakeholders, faith community, youth, philanthropy, government officials, that's focused on reducing violence and violent deaths among black men and boys, which is why we're here to really help launch this work. And so the vision statement for Cities United is that by 2025, more than 500 mayors across the country will have formed those partnerships, and we'll see a 50% national reduction of violence and violent deaths among African American men and boys. And so Van mentioned this 14 down and counting framework. So as part of the commitment that the mayors have made to joining Cities United is that they're committing to a framework that's referred to as 14 down and counting. Now, you might be asking, why the reference to 14 down and counting, right? It's based on the statistic that every 24 hours, we lose 14 young men in this country to gun violence, mostly black and brown. Every 24 hours. What's today? Friday? That's today. Tomorrow, another 14 young men gunned down in this country. Not just an Eric Gardner, not just a Michael Brown, 14. That's Sunday. That's Monday. So there's an urgency, right, to this epidemic that we're not talking about. Right, so what are 14 things as a mayor, as a city, that you guys are committing to really drive this work? And so part of the way we want to spend at least teeing up the conversation this afternoon is really figuring out, can we really get that conversation going as you're moving forward with your work? And so as you see here, there's a list of 7, and the other 7 are listed there. So they're both process things and also substantive things that you're committing to. Creating local leadership teams, looking at how do you improve educational attainment for black men and boys, how do you expand job opportunities? Mayor Jackson was talking about the importance of jobs in the context of the conversation. How do you strengthen the family environment? What does the strategies look like related to that? How do you, what's your effort to reduce violence and address mental health issues? So there's a framing that we want to really put out there and really leverage the expertise, as Van was saying, that's in this room and others that need to be here. And so the other piece to this that I think is also relevant for us at the National League of Cities that gives you a little bit of context of our work is a technical assistance initiative we launched that was parallel to Cities United that selected 11 cities to participate in an intensive TA with us. And this, again, was one of those things that caught me by surprise because I was expecting maybe 5 applications, right? I would have been happy if we got 5, but we ended up getting 30. I only had 5 slots. Right? And so that's what the foundation paid us for, to be able to support 5 cities. And it was one of those moments where I was like, we just can't select 5. We got to figure out, how can we work with more cities? And if you're wondering what Savannah selected, y'all didn't apply, so y'all get on, we'll work on that next time, right? So there were 30 cities that applied, and the commitment that those cities were making were really around these 5 areas, right? That the city leader, the mayor, was making a commitment to frame this issue locally and raise visibility around the Black Male Achievement Agenda, that they were willing to create a partnership structure that's dedicated to improving life outcomes and opportunities for black men and boys, that your commitment was also looking at the data. We can't have a conversation if you're not bringing data into the room, and really appreciate what Van was doing in his presentation, because it's really showing again the city's commitment to really understanding the data and how data is driving your decisions. So how are you effectively utilizing your data? Implementation of strategies, and any conversation that we show up in, we very, very rarely talk about a program, right? Because if we're talking about program first, we've jumped way too far into the weeds before we've really set the right foundation, right? Because as far as I know, there's not one Nobel Peace Prize program that will solve the problems that we're talking about, right? So before we talk about a program, we got to be clear about where we're going, right? And then also the other piece to this is your commitment to authentically engaging these young men in the process. That's why we brought their voices into the room today, right? Because they are the best tellers of their stories, right, than I am. I'm a black man, but I ain't a young black man. I think I am still a young black man. I'm a young black man, although Gerald likes to think was calling me old earlier today. But they are the best tellers of their stories, right? And so here were the 11 cities that were selected. Pretty diverse range of cities. If you look at those that are on the list, from Charlottesville to Omaha to Philadelphia, right? Omaha, yes, Omaha, Nebraska. Right, I didn't even know there were black people in Omaha, right? Until we started working with Omaha, right? So, but if you look at the list, right? How many of those cities or mayors are black? Any guesses? I heard 3, I heard 1. I heard 2. Who said 2? 2. 2 of those mayors, only 2 mayors on that list are black mayors, right? So Mayor Nutter, Philadelphia, and Mayor Brown, not too far from you, Jacksonville, right? Alvin Brown, right? Everyone else, the pretty diverse range of mayors that are taking this on, that are male, female, Asian, race, black, white. We got a Republican Tea Party, Omaha, Mayor Stothert, right? And what's the reason why I pause and acknowledge that, because I had to acknowledge my skepticism 4 years ago, right? I just had to pause and acknowledge that there's a readiness even before the February and the announcement, even before the George Zimmerman verdict, that mayors and city leaders, this is an issue for them. It's important to them. They want to figure out how does this show up in their cities? And from us at the National League of Cities, we are trying to understand that this is a diverse range of conversations we're having. The conversation we're having in Omaha is different than the one we're having in Charlottesville, different than the one we'll have here today in Savannah. But it matters to each city from a larger goal for them in terms of what it means for their city to be thriving, right? And so the work that we're doing with these cities and that the work that we're hoping to start with you here today is really falling into these 5 areas, right? In order to be able to advance this work, what is the vision? What does success look like for black men and boys in Savannah, right? When you wake up 15, 20 years from now, right, and everything is exactly the way it's supposed to be, how are black men and boys in the city of Savannah thriving? That is a question we're going to be asking you today. You're dreaming collectively. Why are you in this room? And why do you think it's important for you to be in this room? And collectively, how do we articulate what that vision is and what you bring into the room to be able to help for that vision to be able to be achieved, right? So you have to have a vision, a shared vision. Your vision can't be different than the person next to you. We should be working together to try to achieve the shared vision for these young men on behalf of the city. And so the first 2 are where we, I think is really the start to the conversation. The fact that there's been intentionality of trying to articulate the vision and making sure that a diverse range of people are here in the room to try to have that conversation, to really set the foundation, is really the first 2 parts of the TA, right? And as you're articulating the vision, how are you then identifying what are the core strategies that you're committing to working on behalf of these young men to be able to achieve, right? And holding yourselves accountable. What's that shared accountability piece that you bring as an organization or as a system, right, or as a city that you are articulating, right? And I do want to just acknowledge the room in the space here, because I think it's so important. In fact, in any city, I don't think in my 10 years, and I have to acknowledge that, in all of the places I've been to, I've never seen a city pause and acknowledge their vision. And I think it was Van that did that, right? He put up the vision statement. Do y'all remember that? He asked you to read it. That's pretty powerful for me, because it's a reminder of why we're all in the room. And he made sure you guys said say the word, right? All citizens, right? That's a pretty powerful thing. That you're not forgetting what your shared vision is. As you bring that into the room and as you're articulating, how are we working collectively towards achieving that? What does that look like in the context of black men and boys, right? And I don't remember the vision, but does anyone see the vision is something that everyone's got to remember, though? Can you say it without looking at it, Van?
Savannah will be.
Oh, we'll call you on the spot.
Environmentally healthy, economically thriving city for all the citizens.
Can you say it? I said we got to work on the room. So maybe the lesson today is that everyone needs to know how to say it, because that's the vision, right? So that's really important, right? So anyway, so the last couple of pieces in context, which is also really important about why you're in the room. This slide for me captures it, right? I know it's empty. I'm going to show it to you in a moment. So, so it looked at a study that was done by Margaret Dunkel in Los Angeles County. She looked at a family of about five or six there, right? Mother, son, daughter, kids. And then she looked at the systems in the lives of that family, right? From the healthcare system to the social services, child welfare, education, mental health, and then the different programs that those families were accessing through those systems. And then she mapped it for them individually, like who was getting what program. And this is what she found. And the reason why you're in the room is you're one of those strands, if not at least one. And when we talk about the systems that we ask all of our children, but you think about in the context of these young men, this is what they have to navigate. And why many times they throw their hands up, because we created these systems for them. And so how do we better design systems in their lives, right? As you're thinking about that shared vision and the strategies and policies that need to be in place, right? To be able to support these larger outcomes for them. And not do this, because this is always important to me. Don't create another task force and another committee meeting to go to. Because who's leaving here to go to another meeting after here? Right? Probably talking about something similar, so connected in some way. Right? So that is not good. That should not be the outcome of this meeting or the follow-ups, right? It's got to be aligned and connected, right, as you're moving forward with this work. Right? And so in addition to all of this, just as context, this momentum that I think everyone is seeing, I think is exciting, right? It's a window of opportunity. So back in February when we were launching Cities United, the president was also launching My Brother's Keeper. While we were in New Orleans and Van was there with us, the president on the second day of our Cities United convening had this big event. We like to say we coordinated that. Right? In fact, we were trying to discourage the White House from doing it because we felt like we were going to lose our mayors, and we lost some of our mayors to go to the White House. But it was a moment, right? Because it acknowledged that this conversation is being elevated at a much larger level. And it was an exciting moment, right? And it was also an exciting moment during when the president made the announcement that he gave a shout out to Cities United. We were all in New Orleans. Everybody was all happy. He gave a shout out. He just called us out, right? And then he got off the stage. And there were about 20 mayors that were there and some young people that were there. He got off the stage, and the President of the United States called us in a room, had a 15-minute conversation with the mayors, with the young people, with the foundation executives, says, just thanking the mayors and those folks in the room for their leadership on this issue and showing his commitment to wanting to work with us as he's launching My Brother's Keeper to make sure that these efforts stay aligned. Right? And so that for us sent the signal how important it was for us to make sure that as cities are jumping on board on this work, that we are intentionally making sure that people that are doing the work on the ground don't get confused that these are separate initiatives. The goal is, whether you call it Cities United, whether you call it My Brother's Keeper, whether you call it Boys and Men of Color, we're talking about the same thing. The goals are the same thing. Don't create two different things or three separate things. That's not the intent of this, right? And so it might, for those that are trying to follow My Brother's Keeper and are confused, get in line, because all of us are, right? Because they're still figuring it out, and that's okay, right? There's a foundation side to it, and there are over 40 foundations now that have stepped up to the table and willing to commit over $200 million to this work. There's the president's side. They both came out with reports. Right? If you look at the goals of each of their reports, they are somewhat aligned. So MBK has kind of a cradle to career framework. The executive foundations also have a similar cradle to career framework. So it was intentional that they're connected. So we're still figuring stuff out. So I just wanted to make sure I acknowledge that space in the room for those that are following and trying to understand where this is going. And all of us are talking. Right? Folks are intentionally trying to make sure that we're not getting ahead of each other, right? And which is why it might seem a little confusing. But I think the encouraging sign is that there's an acknowledgement that there are people that have started doing this and are in position to be models, right? Which is why we're here in Savannah. Which is why when I've been talking with Vanna, we wanted to come here to be able to be as supportive as we can, because we know of the success that's happening here in your city. And we want to be whatever we can to be as helpful as we can. So we're excited about that, and I wanted, before we pivot, I wanted to pause, because I know there's a lot of talking and framing going on from the mayor to the vice mayor and myself in the video, just to see if there are any questions, because we want to, this is probably the last you'll hear from all talking heads, and we're going to start to facilitate a discussion over the course of the time that we have. But let's just open it up to see if folks have any questions in the room. We got microphones to pass around. And this is just clarifying questions, not soapbox moments, right? Not soapbox moments. You know what I mean by soapbox moments? All right, this is just clarifying questions. Just clarifying questions. Over here, Mike.
There were 11 cities already selected I think that all started in August of 2013, maybe somewhere in that
Yes.
range. Can you talk about some of the things that those cities have done in the last year that might help direct the discussion?
Yeah, so the question was, of the 11 cities that were selected, what have they done since they've been selected? So there's a range of things. Following that framework that we've that I've showed, a number of cities have created structures within their communities that are focused specifically on African American men and boys. So either mayors are co-chairing it with other key people within the community. Other cities have dedicated specific resources, some using CDBGF dollars, some other dollars that they've gotten through SIF, Social Innovation Funds, that have allowed them to target their efforts, some of their strategies towards black men and boys. So there's a resource, there's structure that's been put in place, and then from a policy standpoint, just high level in response to you, there are a number of policy areas that cities have either taken on or looking to take on. So the one of them that's been consistent across all the cities is looking at ban the box policies. So those have heard, do you all have that here in Savannah already? No, not yet. So ban the box policies is one that's passed in just about every city. For those that don't know ban the box, it's that box on the application that asks, do you have a criminal record? A background record. And so a number of cities have really have created, there's a lot of models out there where you've created a structure where you eliminate that from the first stage of interviewing process. So it allows people to at least be considered, and you don't completely just ignore the person because they have a criminal record. So if they're a strong candidate, at least they come in, get that second interview, and if you want to hire them, they still got to go through a background check, so you still have to know, at least acknowledge it later on in the space. But it's a great way of really addressing an issue that's a major hurdle for a lot of these young men. So the ban the box is a really a big one. There's a strong partnership with the school district, where a number of those school districts have also joined and made a commitment to targeting some of their policies and strategies around African American men and boys. So just a few, and I can share with you on some other strategies around employment, about how cities have worked more effectively with their WIBs to think about summer, youth, and year-round jobs that targeted training and career opportunities for young men. So for me, what's been exciting in the work that we've done in 18 months is that you've been able to see these mayors and elected officials understand the importance of their leadership and their voice by creating a structure, and for them being visible and using their platform, whether it's through the site visits and using press conferences to elevate this, resource allocation and showing that they're backing what they're saying with money to target it, and the partnerships and the structures to really address some of the policies. Yep. Yes, Mayor.
One of the things, ban the box, that has come before council, and we have Solana Plains brought it to us here in Savannah through Atlanta, and we are working with them to see what the city can do about it. So I did want everyone to know that it was presented to us about a month ago. So we are
Great.
Stepping up to the plate.
Great. Madam City Council Member.
Yeah. I'm really big on effective utilization of data and collecting the right data, because I think you can end up putting a whole lot of resources into the wrong area. Is there any models in other cities of the right data to collect and use?
Great question.
Because I think we really need that here.
Yeah, so some good models that we have leveraged and used in the cities. And so one of the things I forgot to say in the presentation that, to your question, which I think is connected to this question, cities have been very effective at using data to target where their neighborhoods are. So Omaha is a really great example. Yes, Omaha, said that again before, right? Omaha, they know their number, is what I say. 865 young men. They know it's North Omaha zone. They've been working effectively with the school district, with child welfare, to be able to identify the population and the criteria for the young men that they're targeting, and they're really using that number to really design their plan and their strategy. So that's an example at a city level, and then at a larger national level, the Institute for Black Male Achievement, if you go to blackmaleachieve.org, there's a website there you can sign up and join. There are resources available that through what they're creating around their data dashboard at a city level to help city understand how to access data to help you define and understand kind of the population that you're targeting around black men and boys. What are the resources, data tools for you to be able to use? And for some cities, they've already run the data for you. And I think in some cases, if you request it, they're willing to do it as well. So that's another good resource if you go to blackmaleachieve.org to get that.
I just want to add, Dr. Johnson, remember, through the Youth Future Authority, we once identified what's called Area C on the east side of town. We also know here we have 5 census tracts that have been in what's called perennial poverty, generational poverty, over 20% for over 30 years. And if you drop the crime in our community, it's usually it all runs together. That's why high crime rates are. We all know those places are. We know those communities lie. So, I mean, the data follows that. Where we have issues of poverty, and it shouldn't be like that, but where we have issues of poverty, where we have issues of blight, we have those issues of crime and undereducation, a variety of things that are happening there. I'm sure Ms. McLeod could tell you where those young kids come from. They come from those same areas. And if we draw a line from those kids in those areas to the jails and to the prisons, that's where daddy is, in some cases where mama is, and grandmamas are raising our kids in those same areas. So, add that.
Yeah. Other questions? Okay, good. Yeah.
Yes. Concerning all the young men that was, excuse me, concerning all the young men that was shown in their lifestyles and how they live, I am one of those young men who come from that arena, and I do believe that I have much to offer to give to our community that can really turn some things around, because I am all of it.
Yeah.
One of our strategies is to we have to enlist people who can talk and talk and communicate with folks where they are. I don't have the same life experiences as some of the folks we're talking about. So we have people who have had issues in their life, they've overcome them, and they want to be able to give back. So we have to find out who they are and get them engaged, get them involved, and get them to go back into the communities and do that. So that's part of one of the strategies, because again, we feel the young brother from Philadelphia, Brandon, very effective. I rode back on a plane with him, and I mean, just the things that he's been able to do, he can talk the language. And so we realize that someone walking in there with a suit, whose subjects and verbs may agree, may not be the best person. Well, it might be the best person. I'm from this neighborhood, and I'm you. And so we want to be able to encourage people to do that.
And I think those are really good points that the Vice Mayor is raising, and I want to add to that, if I could, because your voice is important, absolutely. Brandon's voice is important, and it brings obviously a realness into the conversation, but my voice is important too. Right, and so is yours, and so is yours, and so is yours, and so is yours, right? And so it's not, there's a reason why we're in this room is to understand collectively that we acknowledge that we value those lives, right? And we understand in the context of the work that we do, we need to have that conversation, discover that, and today we want to be able to discover how each of you show up in this space, right? What does it look like, right, as we're talking about, and what is that dream that we all have for those young men? Right? That shouldn't be different than the dream for any others, right? In this community, but articulated in the context of how you show up and how we can help. Let's articulate. We can't go any further if we can't normalize that and set that as an important foundation. Because right now each of us are showing up individually in this space, right? And we want to leave in a different. We want to leave in a different way, right? Mayor Johnson.
What are we learning from the half of our young men who grow up in the same environment but do not take the trajectory that we are talking about? What do we know about the resiliency of our young men who live in similar environments but are able to come out in a better place?
I think that's a good question to go into a conversation with. I think if we can hold that for a good discussion piece. Great point. Great point. Yes, ma'am.
Are there any cities that have a program focusing on a type of positive psychology approach? For instance, similar to what the SNCC did back during the Civil Rights Movement, but in the reverse, where we see profiles of the doctor here and you, that we can show these young men that, you don't have to be a drug dealer, et cetera, but look at this doctor and look at this person here. I see a lot of statistics on what's wrong. I see murder statistics, but I never see any of the positive statistics.
Yeah.
For instance, 35% of all degrees are earned by Black women, and 10% of all college degrees are earned by Black people, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
What are we showing, or are there any cities that are using the approach of, hey, look what's good, rather than you're bad, you're bad, we need to fix you?
So let me do that in two parts. Part of your question is a good table conversation we'll break out and have about what can you do here in your city to change the narrative, is what you're really in many respects talking about. But the other piece I can respond to at a national level, there is a lot invested in this work and in this field around changing the narrative, because a lot of the images we see of young men or young Black men are negative. And there are a lot of positive stories to be able to tell, like let's look in this room, right? Of young men and some older young men that are in this room that have positive stories to tell. And so at a national level, let me give you 3 resources if you're interested in following up and learning more. One is the Opportunity Agenda. If you go to their website, they've put out some resources on changing the narrative and on some language that they've been crafting, and really how do we talk about the positive around Black men and boys. American Values Institute, Alexis McGill Johnson has also been a forefront if you go to their website and connect with her. And then the third is the Be Me Initiative, the letter B, Me, M-E initiative, run by Travion Shorter, who came out of the the Knight Foundation down in Miami. And this is probably one of the most powerful, to your point, of he's engaging now over 3,000 young men across the country that's sharing their stories, online videos about telling the positive stories about who they are, and really looking past kind of the initial, kind of that implicit bias of you're judging me before you know me. And so there's some powerful stories that are through the Be Me initiative that I think connect specifically to kind of examples that you're looking for. Is there another question over here? Yeah. And again, remember, we're going to pivot into conversation, so if there are clarifying questions or questions for me or the mayor or Dan.
I'm very excited about the conversation today, and I don't mean to pivot it, but I do worry sometimes that we forget the people who have the Black boys, and that we're not having enough conversations about what are we doing with our Black girls. So I just hope that as we begin these conversations, that we remember that the girls who are in 6th grade now, we need to be focusing also on what their choices are, because that's going to affect the boys who come along.
Absolutely.
10 years from now.
Absolutely. So, and for those that have been following over this past year, some of the back and forth on a national level around My Brother's Keeper, there's definitely been, for those that have been following, articles that have come out about what about the girls space. And my argument to that is, boy, that's a false premise, right? And they really are trying to distract and put people against each other, and that's not even the design of what the initiative is intended to do, right? And what the reason why it's a false premise is the assumption is that there's nothing that's being done for the girls, right? And that's absolutely false, right? It's absolutely false, right? There is a lot being done, right? Now, the elevation of My Brother's Keeper doesn't mean that the girls are less important. But what it does do is create an opportunity, because there's an opportunity on different fronts to figure out what does investment look like, right? And that improves outcomes for boys and men of color. And to that point, if you're improving outcomes for boys and men of color, is it only benefiting them? Right, it benefits the parents, the single moms for the most part that are, and when we talk about strategies, they're raising these young men, the families that they're in, the communities that they're in, right? And so the assumption is that it only will help one population. So I'm really cautious of really getting caught up in it's a this or that, and they're creating this tension between boys and girls, and that's not the intent. It shouldn't be the intent that how this shows up in this room, and we won't push it that way as we're going forward. Yeah.
I have a comment in line with changing the narrative. Obviously, the data we collect certainly influences the narrative. And so what I'm concerned about is how do we identify those organizations or groups of individuals that are doing out of the ordinary things? And with the idea that by observing them and following them, that it expands the data set and the type of data that we focus on when we're putting together, our presentations and our reports. Because I'm looking around the room and I can see 2 or 3 individuals and groups that are doing things that are really outside the box, and I'm wondering how often we follow what they do in terms of that being the foundation for data collection.
So there are 2 parts. Most of that question I want to have not between you talking to me. I want you guys to have in your conversations as you're pivoting into locally. How do you really identify what data you want to hold yourselves accountable for? That's not Leon coming to talk to you. That's a collective conversation. So I want to hold most of that into as we pivot after lunch to have that conversation. But the other piece to your point that I think is important, that's a critical one, is a capacity question for organizations that are doing good work and want to be able to demonstrate the impact that they're having in the work. And there's a lot that's being invested, particularly in the Black men and boys space, to really strengthen the capacity of those organizations. So I want to encourage you to, if you haven't gone already, to go to blackmaleachieve.org. The organization's Policy Link and Root Cause are the 2 co-facilitators of that initiative. And so they are designed and resourced to be able to strengthen the capacity of local organizations to demonstrate impact, right? And so it's a good resource for you to be going to see how those resources, not just you, others, that could be useful. But I think the other piece of what the data is that you want to hold yourselves accountable locally, I don't want to, if I go down that slippery slope here, we won't get into that conversation.
And if I may, we did agency. We did, bona fide agencies for the purpose of just illustrating what our current situation is. Part of today is the opportunity to see who's out there and see what they do. And as we move through this process and people are doing good work, we want to be able to inventory that work and make sure that we catalog. Because a lot of times in our community, people are working on the same thing and nobody knows what we're working on. And that is why we've really not been as successful as we can be in the aggregate, because everybody's solo dogging it. So if we have agencies and organizations that are doing good work and working on the same thing, then let's create opportunities for collaboration. And so that's part of what the conversation is today, and why y'all gonna eat and y'all gonna fellowship and y'all gonna exchange business cards and phone numbers. Because again, the fact is we're large, but we're large enough to be small and small enough to be large. Get to know these folks.
So this is a good transition point. So we're going to allow you guys to have a informal networking, get to know you lunchtime between now and 12:30. So we got about we might cut it a little short, maybe 12:15. And then when we come back, the next part of the afternoon, and we hope for those that are here to stay, just give you a little bit of context. There's going to be a workbook if you haven't gotten it already. We're going to be passing out. That will take us through this conversation in what we hope is a very structured way to really begin to have a sense of where we are and where we're looking to go in the city on behalf of Black men and boys. And so I'm going to turn it over to Van to last
quick.
week.
The mayor wanted me to acknowledge Commissioner Yusef Shabazz has arrived as well here. Thank you so much for coming, as well as Chief Judge Leroy Burke of Juvenile Court, Judge Lisa Colbert of Juvenile Court, and of course Judge Stone had already been mentioned earlier. Also very glad to have our Chief of Police, who is real brand new here. I'm glad he's still here. Chief Lumpkin, good to see you, and certainly take the time to introduce yourself to our Chief. And Chief Julie Tarbert is here. We already mentioned Colonel Gilberg and Major Gloria Wilson from our Sheriff's Department. We're also very blessed to have them here with us today. Y'all, it's all right if we pray before our food. Y'all be mad at me? Pastor Tillman. Come on up, Pastor Tillman. I'm not sure y'all want me to pray over your food. I might do one of those, Father, I stretch my hand to thee prayers. No other help I know.
Let us turn to Psalm 30. I'm sorry. Let us pray. Lord God, our creator, sustainer, we ask in a special way that you bless the food we're about to receive, that it may be nourishing to our bodies. Amen.